Welcome to Pragmatic. Pragmatic is a show about technology and contemplating the finer details and their practical application. By exploring real-world trade-offs, we dive into how great ideas can be transformed into products and services that impact our lives. This episode is sponsored by Solver by Aqualia. Solver is an amazing calculation app that works the way your mind does when you're working out a math problem on paper. More powerful than a calculator, simpler and quicker than a spreadsheet. Solver can help you solve your math problem. Visit solver.app and check it out today. This episode is also brought to you by Manytricks, makers of helpful apps for the Mac. Visit manytricks.com/pragmatic for more information about their amazingly useful apps. We'll talk more about both of our sponsors during the show. Pragmatic is supported by you, our listeners. If you'd like to support the show, you can by supporting our sponsor or by becoming a premium supporter. Premium support is available via Patreon and through Apple Podcasts channel subscription. Premium supporters have access to early release, high-quality ad-free episodes, as well as bonus material from all of our shows not available anywhere else. We're edging closer to our monthly goal to go advertising-free across the network, but we can only do that with your help. Pragmatic is also a Podcasting 2.0 enhanced show, and with the right podcast player, you can also stream Satoshis and boost with a message as you listen. Just visit engineer.network/pragmatic to learn how you can help this show to continue to be made. Thank you. I'm your host, John Chidgey, and today I'm joined by my friend Clay Daly. How you doing, Clay?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fantastically because I'm just thrilled to have you back on the show because we last spoke on episode 94 about photography.
Yeah, that was 10 episodes ago, I guess.
Yeah, I know, 10 episodes, 2 years. It's been a rough 2 years, okay? I think globally speaking, that's a fair assessment.
Oh, yes.
And that has impacted the podcast regularity for me for that and a myriad of other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, 2 years, well, it's been about 2 years. And in those 2 years, for me, a lot has happened. And I've come, I'd like to think a long way in with photography.
Mm-hmm.
So the time is right for us to have another chat, I think. So thank you for agreeing to come back on and have a chat about photography again.
Anytime.
Awesome. Well, last time, just a bit of a recap. So dear listeners, if you have not listened to episode 94, first of all, shame on you. You really should. Because if you want to go back and have a refresh, you could pause now and go back and have a listen.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a short one. It's only 2 hours and 20-something minutes, so don't worry. But we did cover a lot of ground. And one of the things that my posit, I suppose, from the episode last time we spoke, Clay, about this on Pragmatic, was I was putting a question out there. Is it worth buying a, in air quotes, real camera? Or is just a basic smartphone camera going to be enough for me? I think that the conclusion of that episode was that if you want to do something more advanced than what a smartphone can do, it is definitely worth buying a real camera.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously with the whole thing about saying like a real camera is a device that's dedicated, as its sole purpose is to do that one thing as well as possible, as in be a camera.
Right.
So the funny thing is that we did touch on, like DSLRs and mirrorless, but one of the things that you said to me at the time was that you wanted to get into mirrorless, a few years ago when I bought the D500.
Mm-hmm.
And you're prepared to jump brands to get to a really good mirrorless camera. And
Mm-hmm.
and I looked at that at the time and I thought, nah, this whole mirrorless thing, I don't know about that. But what I've increasingly seen in the last 2 years is that the whole revolution in digital photography seems to be a mirrorless revolution. It's all going mirrorless. And there is so much evidence now about that I don't think anyone can deny it anymore. I think
Right.
that DSLRs are on the way out. I mean, and I want to point out that you did call this long before I did. So, kind of nailed that. So, I mean, I did a little bit of research into.
Mhm.
I know, right? Funny, me research anyway. I did a little bit of research into just Canon and Nikon or Nikon. However, if I've been mispronouncing it, I don't. You know who I mean.
I say it both ways, so go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Come on. Well, I'm going to stick with Nikon then, since that's the way I've always said it. But anyhow, so I found a rumor site that said that the Nikon would be releasing 2 DSLR upgrades in 2021. I haven't seen them yet, so I don't even know if that's true. But
I've seen it as well, and it was a bit baffling to me, but yeah.
yeah, but I mean, they haven't actually, and it's now September. In fact,
You're
it's
right.
late September, so I don't know if that's even true. But if you look at what they've released in the past, each year, every so many years, last I can tell, they haven't released a new DSLR in over 3 years, I believe, if I do my math correctly, from Nikon.
It sounds about right.
Yeah. So everything they've released has been mirrorless, and they're pimping the Z9 because, well, and that's a top of the line mirrorless.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a DSLR.
Right.
So then I had to dig into Canon, and Canon aren't developing any more EF lenses. So far as I know, they haven't released any updated EF lenses. Everything is RF mount for their for the mirrorless line.
Yep.
So have you heard of any, like, a Canon, to the best of your knowledge, are they releasing any?
I haven't seen. I believe, I mean, Nikon and Canon both were sort of a bit late to the party. And but once they did jump in, I mean, they went big.
Oh yeah.
And that's why you see the Z9 and the R3 were both of them were sort of dangled in front of the prospective groups, because they want to make sure that they kept their base, right? They want to make sure that that Nikon is going to stick around and work on a camera that's going to be really powerful. Canon is going to work on something really powerful. Canon has finally released theirs. We're waiting for Nikon now to release theirs, and because I mean, Sony jumped in early. Olympus and Panasonic really jumped in the earliest, but they aren't really the ones people are flocking to, because Sony did what they did with with the ability to give you a really good hybrid system, photography, video, and that's why a lot of people are really into mirrorless, right? Because you could have video done without having to set up a whole big rig just to get your DSLR to be able to do video well, right?
For sure. I mean, that's an interesting point. I'll just put a pin in that, and we'll circle back to it. But so one of the other things that we were talking about, I think it was a couple episodes ago on Bubble Sort, was we were talking about my toying with the idea of switching to Canon just to get to like an R6, because the reason that I put at the time was that all of the reviews of Canon were that Canon were better in low light and in autofocus tracking, and that's what I really wanted. And so I was trying to justify, but even at the end of that conversation, I hadn't decided to. And since then, I've decided not to do that, and I've stuck with Nikon. So what I ended up doing is I ended up going, okay, before I get to that, maybe I should just quickly talk about my current cameras. And I can actually say that now because I have multiple, which is, I don't know how long that's going to be the case. So one of them I own, one of them I'm renting. So the one that I own is, of course, my trusty Nikon D500, and I moved originally from my original D5500. So the D500's got a 20.9 megapixel CMOS sensor, and it is a DX DSLR. So yeah, APS-C.
Right.
The one I have chosen to rent at the moment is a Nikon Z6 II. So that's not a Z6 I. This is the second generation one. And the key difference with the Z6 II for me is it has 2 XP6 processors in it, which means that essentially the Z6 I was just probably crippled. It's analogous to the Series 0 Apple Watch, I think, insofar as it was the minimum viable mirrorless that they could make at the time, and it struggled. And like with autofocus in particular, it had a great sensor, but it was terrible at autofocus. And a lot of pro photographers just panned it and said, "Do not touch it." Same with the Z7,
the original one,
and that was the original one. Yeah, the Z7. Don't put a 2 after it. Well, I mean, because they never call it the Z7 1, but So the Z7, it's like no, don't touch that. And same with the Z6, and that was what was driving me towards Canon at the time. But then I started to read more about people's hands-on experiences with the Z6 II and the Z7 II, and I ended up going with the Z6 II for 2 reasons. Well, obviously that was the first reason, was that they'd got the autofocus working. It was the fact that the Z6 over the Z7 had better low light performance because it's a 24.5 megapixel backside illuminated CMOS sensor, which outperformed the Z7, although the Z7 was 45 megapixels. And when we spoke about this, you pointed that out actually. Because I was saying, I want the more megapixels in the Z7 so that I can crop. But crop to zoom kind of thing, because they're both full frames. But in the end, I thought about it. It's like, but I really need that low light.
Yeah.
And because I'm doing indoor basketball photography, and I'm doing it in a stadium that is basically got the worst light you can imagine. I mean, it's not quite as bad as candlelight, but it's not that much better. Hey?
Close enough.
It's just so bad. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But anyway, so that's what I'm currently using, and I've been using the Z6 II now for almost 2 months, not quite, been about 7 weeks, and it's today was my first day using it in cricket. I've used it in many games of basketball, a few games of netball at night as well, and this thing for portraits and stills at still photography at nighttime, and it's just like no flash. And it's magic.
Nice.
This thing is incredible. It just pulls beautiful photos out of the darkness. It's just incredible. So anyway, that's what I'm currently using. I'll talk a little bit more about pros and cons of mirrorlesses in a minute, but how about we just quickly run through what you currently use? And I mean day to days, because I know that you've got a wall full of cameras. So not the so let's go with the day-to-days. Please.
So I still have my original Sony A7, which is what I bought probably in 2018 or so. And I added just recently the A7R4 to that because when I was shooting events or shooting portraits, the A7 was struggling. It probably is no better than the Z6 original in terms of focusing, in low light situations. Now I do use external flash sometimes, and that does help. But my main 2 cameras right now are the A7R4, which is 61 megapixels, and the A7, which is 24. It's a great combo if you have both of those setups. Something where you have the ability to have something, because my A7 technically. The A7 and the A7R4 in terms of low light ability are about the same, because the 24 megapixels is really good at gathering light, and the A7R4 with 61 megapixels, all these years of evolution have made it something that can actually gather enough light. Not amazing like a Z6 II or A7R3 or an A7S3, but good enough.
Interesting, yeah, because I know that you've you're one of the things that you love to do apart from street photography is moon photography, which I've come to appreciate is significantly different to just astrophotography. I think lunar photography has to be held separate to that, simply because it's quite difficult to do it well.
I'm not sure if it's difficult, but it is astrophotography takes actually more time, right? Moon photography, shutter speeds. I mean, we're talking about a bright globe in the sky. The shutter speeds could be a lot higher, with astrophotography. If your shutter speeds are too high, you're not getting anything.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, well, I'm absolutely agree with that. But I guess what I was trying to get at is that what I've found is that there's the precision versus there's a precision of how accurate the photo can be in terms of the details of each crater, every speck of dust on the moon's surface, versus capturing kind of like the mood of the moon in contrast with like clouds and different other aspects like landscape, and that's the difficult bit, I think.
Yeah. No, and that definitely is a difficult bit, because it's a balancing act.
Yeah, exactly, and it's hard to strike that balance.
Yeah, it is,
I've really
definitely
struggled. I mean,
no, I agree with you on that for sure. Yeah,
yeah, but that's a good challenge.
Yep.
That's a good one.
It is what keeps me going. Right? I mean, to keep trying to strive for that just that perfect moment, and for the most part, I was shooting the moon with manual lenses until just now, till my recent purchase. Autofocus is for me a bit of a struggle, just because I've been shooting it manual for all this time. But I'm actually enjoying that. I'm enjoying trying to achieve the same level of what I was trying to get, what I was getting before.
Well, you were doing lunar photography, I think, with was it 800 millimeter reflector?
At one point, I had 500. I have a 500 times 2, so I have one that's 1,000 basically. And I have my main one is actually a 300 with a 2x, which is a 600, but then you put it on a body, which is 2.7. So.
Yeah, okay, sure, of course. Fair enough. So your recent purchase was what, sorry?
The Sony 200 to 600.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which, putting it on the 61 megapixel camera, I actually have a 1.4 converter as well. But putting that on a 61 megapixel Sony body, if I were to crop in a little bit, the quality is still better than what I would get with the small Nikon sensors that I am using.
Wow. Okay. That's a heck of a lot of reach too.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
Impressive. Okay, cool. So, all right, well, thanks for that. I guess one of the things I wanted to sort of was flesh out a little bit was some of the pros and cons of DSLR versus mirrorless, because as I was making a lot of these sorts of choices, as I imagine you've gone down a similar path, is there's lots of different opinions out there about you can't possibly have a mirrorless because of DSLRs will always be better at this, and this. So I'm like, all right, well let's flesh some of that out. I think the biggest single one for me with a DSLR as an advantage, well, a supposed advantage, I think it's reasonable to say, is everything you see through the viewfinder, you see it live real time. There's not an electronic viewfinder. It's a real, just you're seeing exactly what the camera sees. Except obviously when the mirror box is sort of like doing the whole flip thing and taking the actual photo. But it still makes it a lot easier to track, especially a fast moving subject. If you're doing like lunar photography, it's a non-issue. If you're doing something that I think that's not moving, it's a non-issue. But if you're in sports photography, I've noticed in the D500, yes, it is actually easier. I do believe that it's easier on a DSLR to track fast-moving subjects than on a mirrorless.
Agreed.
I mean, there is a but though, and I guess the thing is that just because you can see it through the viewfinder doesn't mean the camera's focusing quickly enough,
right,
or holding focus on that subject. So I can point the camera at a moving subject, but if it's moving, like the worst case scenario is my focal plane set at however many feet, meters, yards, whatever away they are from me. If if I don't have that depth of field cranked so that if they're moving too much towards me, then they're going to drop out of that. They're going to drop out of focus real fast. So if that camera's not adjusting, then it doesn't matter if I'm tracking them and pointing the camera in the right direction. They're going to be a blur before I can blink.
Yeah.
At which point then I don't get any keepers. So what's the point?
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, when I first transitioned over to mirrorless, and I still have some DSLRs, but when I first transitioned over, it was Panasonic, where you if you were shooting the Panasonic, there's no way you would want to shoot mirrorless because um it I mean, what you saw in the viewfinder was hyper pixelated, super pixelated,
Right.
and very laggy. And you kind of had to shoot with anticipation, right?
Yep.
You'd have to be where the action would be before the action was there, and you'd have to sort of know the camera to know what its limitations were and how how to make sure that you could have the focus happen where it's gonna be. Now you're gonna have a lot of missed shots because again you're you're keeping an eye on the real life stuff happening in front of you at the same time as having your camera who's very laggy. We've gone completely way far beyond that. We still haven't gotten to the point of DSLR
No.
real time viewfinders, but like you said, if the DSLR isn't really helping you in terms of being able to sort of track that. And I mean, you could have. I mean, the systems are pretty good, but for me, the mirrorless benefits sort of outweigh, even though it's slightly laggy compared to DSLR, it still outweighs the DSLR for me.
Yeah, and I agree with that statement. Specifically with regards to this point, specifically, what I found is that I will set my like okay, if it depends on the sport. And so for example, today I was taking photos of cricket, and so if I'm taking photographs of a bowler, when the bowler's coming in to deliver the ball, I set my focal point just near the umpire, and at f5.6, because that's the lowest I can go on my 200/500 zoom. That's still a reasonable depth of field. So even if they're like 5 meters either side of that focal point, they're still going to be pretty sharp. And so I can get away with that, and I'll hold focus there, and I won't actually adjust focus, and I'll just let it rip, and I'll just take burst photos as they're delivering and pick the best one, and I can get away with that. But basketball's tricky, and it's also tricky with cricket if you're trying to follow the ball out to the fielder. Because then you don't know which fielder it's going to go to. You can't set up your shot.
Right.
You got to wait. You got to track it. And that's so hard to get it right. And what I learned is that with the D500, any sport, in fact, where I can set the focus point and wait for the action to come to me, that it doesn't matter. The D500, the mirrorless, doesn't make any damn difference because I'm not tracking a subject exactly. It's kind of moving into the zone where I can capture the photo. So where it struggles, and what I've found is it's struggling because of the lens's ability to focus quickly, not because of the body. And that's what I've learned. So for me, tracking a subject has got more to do with the compute power in the body, of which the D500 and, for my case, the Z6 II are both quite good. But it's more the lens and how fast your lens's autofocus motor actually is. And that's when I'm tracking a subject. So I think that it's a bit of a red herring to say, oh, well, I can't keep an eye on them through the viewfinder, therefore I can't track them. I don't actually think that's a real world problem. And I've also gotten quite good at keeping both eyes open, okay, that probably sounds weird, but okay, let me explain myself. What I mean is when I started with photography years ago, I can say that now, it's been a few years, is I would close my left eye and I would use my right eye, through the viewfinder. And it was just like, that's just the way I would take photos. So I was focused through the viewfinder. And then what I realized is that, my left eye still works, So what I can do is I can track the subject, broadly speaking, with my left eye and keep the position of the camera like the same position over my face. So as I move my head, I know as I'm moving my eye and I'm moving the body around that I'm shifting where I'm focusing. And if I've then got the mirrorless and it's not keeping up with live real time, then it doesn't make any difference because I'm still tracking the subject with my normal eye looking past the body of the camera.
Yep.
And because I have 2 working eyes. I mean, well, glasses notwithstanding, but they mostly work.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a moment to talk about our sponsor for this episode, and that's Solver. Solver is a calculation app by Aqualia for the Mac. Now, I'm careful to call Solver a calculation app because it's more than just a calculator, and it's much quicker and easier to use than a spreadsheet. Just start typing away, and in real time, the answers show up in the right-hand column. Let's say you want to figure out 10% of 200. Just type that exactly, and there's your answer. Converting currencies, 10 euro plus 10 USD in AUD. Done. I use it for that all the time. Crazy things like you want to know how many minutes you've been alive. Try 45 years, 5 weeks, and 4 days as minutes, and it turns out I've been alive 23,720,000 minutes. Yay, I'm so old. It's my go-to app when I'm converting between Celsius and Fahrenheit. 21F in C, done. A recently added neat feature I like is the ability to convert between Satoshis, Bitcoin, and to fiat currencies. That's very handy. And a great new feature, you can also now publish your worksheets and share them with anyone. Just hit share and copy the link and send it to whoever you like. Easy. Solver 3 for the Mac makes time and date calculations really easy too, like 30th of August 2021 to today, in weeks, in days, in hours, whatever you like. And Solver also supports time zone aware date and time calculations and conversions as well. You can link different result lines together easily to create more complex calculations with subtotals included. It now comes with full dark mode support and it looks amazing. And if you use a touch bar on your Mac, it supports that as well. Full integration with Spotlight Search with Automator, Solver now has a command line tool that integrates beautifully with Alfred. It has an integrated sheet management system, and you can easily share your working and get your results. The list of great features just goes on and on. If you're not convinced, then go to the URL in the show notes and check out the Mac version, which has a 30-day free trial. I've been using Solver for many, many years, and I use it every single day. Solver for Mac is available from the website solver.app as well as from the Mac App Store. If you use the URL in the show notes, it helps out the show, so please use that URL in the show notes to learn more about this amazing app. Visit solver.app and check it out today. Thank you to Aqualia with their amazing app Solver for once again sponsoring the Engineered Network. The other thing that's interesting on the Z6 II that I'd like to add is that the 5.5 frames per second, it will actually keep up with the live view. But if you push beyond that, it can't keep up because the data rate coming off the sensor is simply not. It just basically floods the channel. It just can't keep up with the data. Yeah, it just can't keep up.
Right.
Like the buffer to save it to the memory card, has got plenty of space. That's not the problem. The problem is the viewfinder just can't keep up. Yeah. So I can do 14 frames per second at its fastest rate, which is 4 frames per second faster than the D500. And I wouldn't have thought those extra 4 frames a second would make a difference, but wow, they really do.
It does
make a difference. So much so that in low light conditions, I can see the ripple effect. And you might think this is really strange, right? So if you've got like fluorescent lights or any other lighting that's not artificially set by a switch mode supply, then you'll see that 50 hertz, or in North America 60 hertz, you'll see that light intensity changing depending upon what moment of the sine wave you take that photo. And it's something that it's truly bizarre till you've seen it,
Yeah.
And it's not like the flicker on a screen, but it's like there's like a wave of darkness going.
Yeah. It's really weird.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've seen it.
And I was taking a photo of my son doing, attempting a layup, and I'm watching because I'm looking straight down the basketball court, and you can just see in each of these shots as I'm going from one to the next, to the next, and you can see the black ripples of, and they're not black. I mean they're just, it's slightly darker,
It's like
but it's so old.
Shade areas.
Yeah, it's like there's a shade between like an imaginary cloud in strips, and it's just like it's rippling down like a ripple pattern.
Yep.
And you can see the amount of light illuminating his face because I can't use a flash. and I have actually will lose shots because the Z6 can't do the exposure compensation quickly enough to get the correct ISO setting, to get the correct, like I will throw away photos that are otherwise perfectly sharp, but they're just a little bit too dark. And if I try and lighten it up too much, it goes too grainy. And I'm like, "Ugh, God, I hate that basketball cord. Oh, it's so hard." Anyway, all right. So let's talk about battery life. That comes up a lot.
And the funny thing is, when I went mirrorless the first time, oh my gosh, painful. Even my original A7 is actually kind of painful. Like my A7, I think I have like probably, I don't know, 10 batteries for it, right?
Wow.
And then finally, when the second generation, left us, because that was still the same battery, because Sony didn't realize that, we were all pissed off trying to tell them the viewfinder actually uses a battery, unlike a DSLR, right? And so now we have these giant batteries because Sony decides, well, yeah, a mirrorless, it should be smaller, but we're not going to make it so small that we can't actually put a battery in there. And so, yeah, I mean, the difference in battery life compared to what I'm used to is not that big anymore. Like, it used to be massive. Like, it used to be with my Panasonic cameras and my Sony, maybe like 150 for my Panasonic, maybe 300 for my Sony. Now I can shoot easily 1,000 with my A7R4.
Nice. Okay. So I had my first ever battery dead experience. And I'd never had a battery dead experience before, because I'm the sort of, like, how should I say, stickler for detail, that I've always got a fully charged battery before I go out and take photos. I never go out with a battery that's got even a fraction of a bar of the battery missing, because that's just the way I anyway.
Yeah,
that's just me. Now the D500 uses the ENEL A and B type of battery, and the ENEL-C has got, I think, it's a few hundred more milliamp hours of capacity. So when they did the Z series, they gave them a slightly larger battery with a bit more capacity to try and combat this. Now, I've got a 64 gig SDHC memory card that I've had since the beginning. And with 24.5 megapixels can fit in RAW about 1,200 photos, roughly. So that amount of photos was enough to essentially flatten the battery. And I know that your mileage will vary depending upon how often you wake the camera up, which is something that I've had to get used to doing with the Z6, because it has quite an aggressive, I'm turning the power off now because you don't seem to be doing anything. And I'm like,
yeah,
dude, I was looking through the EVF and you just turned off on me, and I wanted to take a photo, and I'm not happy with you now. But but still, I don't have another memory card in my pocket, and I guess at some point, if I'm getting more serious about like doing large photography shoots, I'm going to have to do that at some point. But for the moment, a 64 gig memory card equals a full battery in the mirrorless. On the D500, same situation. I've still got more than half a battery left. So
after filling the card,
fill the card, and I've still got half a battery.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt DSLR battery life is far better.
Yep.
But to be honest, it's an easily solved problem. And honestly, how many people are taking 1,000+ photos in a single session?
Yeah, not many.
It's not many. I mean, anyway, so I do. Here's the thing. Mirrorless is definitely worse on battery life. No question whatsoever. But again, I think it's a niche issue. If you're a pro photographer, you've already got multiple batteries, multiple memory cards. It's a non-issue,
Right.
It's easily handled. Anyway, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And again, if you were there in the beginning, you would, like, I welcome any advancement. Like when I got the A7, people were, the internet was full of people just blasting the camera. And I'm like, listen, I came from a Panasonic camera, which was shooting 150 to 200. I welcome 350, just so.
Yeah. All right. So the next one is, I actually had a note here about durability. I can't remember why I wrote down durability, and I thought about it, but it's like, is there someone out there that thinks that DSLRs are more durable than mirrorless. And I'm thinking, well, if you look at Nikon's range, they make lenses and I've got one of them, my 55-200. That's essentially a plastic lens.
Mm-hmm.
It is there's little bits of metal in it, sure, but I mean seriously, the thing is plastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they make I think it's the 3500, I think D3500 is the entry level one or whatever.
Yep.
That thing's made mostly of plastic. I think it's got some metal in it, but it's not it's not made out of magnesium, I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure not.
It's no, I'm pretty sure it isn't. That's why they sell it for so little.
Right.
Now, and that's a DSLR.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're going to compare something like a D5, with a D500, you'd probably say, well, the D5 is probably more rugged than the D500. But if you look at at a Z6 or a Z7, they're both a similar kind of construction to the DSLRs I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got the same amount of metal in them, more or less. So I don't understand. I don't think that it's a mirrorless versus DSLR thing. I think it's a cheap versus semi-pro versus pro, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. You're probably right about that.
Yeah, but I mean, I only know the Nikon examples. I mean, because to me, because mirrorless really, I don't think mirrorless were brought out necessarily to be cheap cameras. They were meant to be originally more portable. That was my understanding.
Yep. That was it. Yep.
So it wasn't about making them out of cheap plastic.
Right.
So, I mean, because if a mirrorless and a DSLR fall in the woods, and please do not drop your cameras in the woods or anywhere. But I think they both get off just as poorly when they hit the ground.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes, in the respective groups, like the pro bodies, yes, will probably fare about the same. The semi-pros about the same, and the entry level probably about the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. The next thing is just quickly is silent shooting. On the mirrorless, which is I initially thought was a beautiful thing, and then I had second thoughts. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I think so. If you're talking about the effects of that you get with certain parts of this effect.
So mechanical shutters, I personally have a love-hate relationship with the mechanical shutter because mechanical shutters are, well, oddly in the name, mechanical, and all mechanical things fail. I mean, okay, you can argue that anything electronic fails as well because everything eventually dies. And as I famously said in a meeting at work once, everything dies. And they looked at me like I was, dude, that was really heavy. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. Let's talk about rainbows for a second. Chocolate. And
they die as well, though, but yes, go ahead.
I mean, I'm not technically incorrect, but okay, fine. It was a bit heavy for the meeting, but that's fine.
Yes.
Hey, anyhow, never mind that. That's fine. I can look back and laugh on it now, but everyone was really upset at the time. Anyhow, right, yes, good. Back on topic. So yes, everything does die, but mechanical stuff dies faster than electronics. So I always console myself that with an electronic shutter, I can in fact go to an electronic shutter if the mechanical shutter ever dies on me. So that's something, which is something the D500, it sort of can, sort of can't, doesn't have a true electronic shutter. And so the electronic shutter on a mirrorless is great because it doesn't make any noise and it doesn't fail in the same way that a mechanical one will wear out after 200,000 or 300,000 or 500,000, activations. Yeah. So, but that does unfortunately have another side effect, like a bending effect. But I think the correct term is rolling shutter, I think.
Yep.
So have you had any experiences with this?
No, not really. Have you? And I mean, I would imagine you probably have that happen more in sports than because I don't shoot sports, but because it is the action.
Yeah, here's the thing: I haven't tried yet in high speed. Like for me, the sport that would be the hardest one, the most likely to be impacted would be cricket because when they're bowling that ball, they're bowling it at 160 kilometers an hour, so like 100 miles an hour. That's going to have some interesting effect with an electronic shutter
Mm-hmm.
at that speed. Just because I can't help myself, I did what every good photographer would do, and I got the electronic shutter setting, and I got a pedestal fan, and it's the middle of winter, well, it's not the middle of winter anymore now, we're just coming into spring, but it was in winter when I was doing it, so I think I got some strange expressions from other family members as I brought out a pedestal fan in the middle of winter, and and I took the protective cover off the front, which was also a strange thing to do because, a wise man once said, don't shove your face in a fan. And I'm like, okay, well, I did not do that, but I did in fact point the camera at it, and wow, it creates the most bizarre and trippy kind of bending effect when you take a photo of the fan blades spinning, because they're spinning at high speed.
Yeah.
And my understanding of as to why this happens is because of the way in which data is read from the sensor.
Yep.
So unlike mechanical shutter where everything is retained, and as you pull it off, the information is retained as it was captured.
Yep.
Whereas an electronic shutter, that is not the case.
It's reading it line by line, basically. We haven't gotten to the global shutter yet, because there's cinema cameras that have global shutters. We don't have global shutters. I wish we were here already, but the electronic shutter is basically reading it line by line. So by the time the blade reaches a certain point, at the bottom, it's read. So the top is set. When it gets to the bottom, it's like, okay, this is a different position, and that's why you have that effect mostly. You don't have that effect so much with the the electronic front shutter, curtain shutter, or like the mechanical shutter, but definitely with the electronic shutter.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting effect. So anything that's moving really quickly, you're basically straight out of luck with an electronic shutter.
Yep.
It will look distorted. But of course, that fan's spinning at however many 100 revs per minute. So it's spinning quite fast. And if you were to look at the leading edge, the speed that it's spinning at is probably significant, which is why, as I say, I think it would be an interesting exercise to try and capture a fast bowler in cricket to see whether or not I get some really cool streak effect from the cricket ball flying through the air, which could be artistic in a very odd way. So I don't know, maybe we'll see. I'll try when I'm feeling more adventurous in the summertime, perhaps.
Well, the interesting thing here, right, is that if you look at the speeds that the camera, like your fastest shutter speeds, you will get with an electronic, because there's nothing moving, right? It's the sensor readout basically. The mechanical is just going to be the second, and then the electronic front curtain is going to be the last. But again, the one with the fastest is the one with the effect, because of the way it reads across that sensor. Unfortunately,
that's right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
So, but having said all of that, there are lots of advantages to an electronic shutter in terms of there's no shutter shake. With a mechanical shutter, you will get some vibration, no matter how minute. Which, if you're doing something in incredibly low light, like astrophotography, not lunar photography, that will come into play as well.
Yep, big time.
Yeah. And just to prove the point, I did take a photo of the Milky Way, which is my best photo of the Milky Way to date, with the Z6 II. I don't know if did I send you the?
I don't think so. I don't believe. I know you've sent me.
Don't think so.
I don't think you have. What was your set? What was your how did you do it? Did you do it with a timer? Like, did you set the camera to be timer? Okay.
So it was a 10-second exposure, and I was using my my wide angle lens, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But it was it was kind of interesting insofar as I didn't do a hell of a lot to it. Like I didn't crank the ISO to a ridiculous number, and I didn't. I almost got my best shot with the first shot. You know what I mean? I'm just like, it was the difference between the D500 and the Z6 II for the Milky Way photography was just like, the D500 I had to coax and and mess around with the whites and the black levels and all that stuff in order to bring out the Milky Way. But with the Z6 II, it just popped with very little effort.
Oh,
it was
nice.
incredible. So I got to dig up that photo. Actually, now I'm wondering what the hell I did with it. I sent it to somebody. I think I might have sent it to my wife, and she was completely uninterested. I think that was what it was. Like, I just took this photo. She didn't even say anything. I'm like, but it's the galaxy. It's beautiful. I took one of the cat also mid yawn, and it looks like she's growling at us and ready to bite her head off. That got a reaction, but no, the Milky Way. So I took that in the backyard.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that was
nice.
Yeah. So that's
And you didn't have to do much in post.
no.
Nice.
And you can see if you closely look around the outside corners, you can actually see the fall off from the lens because it's a DX lens on an FX body.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what that darkening is, and I just couldn't bring myself to crop it. The
thing is that actually it's not. It's actually. I mean, it's not that bad actually. This is. I mean, it'd be worse if it was actually a daytime.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I've got lens corrections in there and everything. But anyway.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
But I mean, that's yeah. So I'll talk a bit about my lenses later actually, because it is interesting about what works and what doesn't on the Z6.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all right.
Wait a second. So hold on.
Yeah.
How far away from your house is this?
It's literally where that photo's taken.
Yeah.
So I've got the house, the back of the house.
Yeah.
I've got a swimming pool, and then I've basically just got, another 30, 40 yards of just like grass and trees. So those trees are probably about 30 yards from the back of my house, 20 yards from the back of the pool.
Oh.
So my back is to the house.
So you live in a dark side, basically.
Yeah, I live in the middle of nowhere, man.
Oh,
well,
okay.
In a matter of speaking.
Oh,
I mean,
nice.
it's beautiful. I love where I live.
Yeah.
It is like I'm a 2.5 minute drive from the freeway, and you can only really hear the freeway at night. And I'm probably about a 6-minute drive from the nearest train station. So I do sometimes hear the trains at night as well, but they're very faint in the background. So if you look south, you can see the glow from Brisbane. And if you look north, you really don't see a heck of a lot of light pollution.
Nice.
And if you look like northwest, you can see practically no light pollution because there's nothing like northwest of us, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is really nice.
I wish I had that here.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, yeah.
I have to go really far for no light pollution.
Yeah. If I want to go to a true dark sky site, I have to go all the way out to. I got about 2.5 hour drive west of me, and at that point, it is so dark. Basically, you would be able to actually get like decent photos of pretty much any celestial object you would like. Where I am, but one of the problems is I really want to get a photo of Andromeda, but Andromeda is hard because it never comes above 22 degrees, which is not ideal because to the north of me, I'm at the bottom of a hill, so I lose a bit of that to the north, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But still. But you can see even with a 10-second exposure. So if you look at the center of the image, you can see all of the stars are pretty sharp. But as soon as you go to the outside of it, you can see them. I think that's some chromatic aberration around the outsides. So the stars become a little bit more like a cross sort of a shape, like a plus sign, which is interesting.
What was your aperture? Was it at its widest?
I just knew you were going to ask me that. Yeah, So it was f2.8, and it was because it's 11 to 16 mil on the DX. In order for it to actually, take a photo that wide, the widest I can go is actually 16.
Oh,
so I can't even if I go down is 11. If I go down, hang on. Let me get this right around.
Is it like 2.8 to 4 or something?
No, it's a 2.8 fixed.
Oh,
aperture.
constant. Okay, I got you.
Constant aperture lens, yeah. It's damn sexy lens. I love it.
I've always liked it looking at.
Yeah, I know. I got it specifically on a recommendation. It was a recommendation from Ian Norman. Did you listen to that episode? It was 102. I think it was 102.
102?
Oh, 101. It was astrophotography of.
Oh, okay. I gotta listen to that one.
Yeah.
How come you didn't ping me? That should have been a ping.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez,
A specific ping. Clay, it's astrophotography. Ping.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess. I'm sorry about that.
I haven't when things when things pop in the Slack, I go listen, but I haven't been in Slack.
Yeah, I haven't either. I duck in and duck out.
Yeah.
All right. So getting back to it, I guess one of the things that I find I originally of the opinion between the Z6 and the Z7 was more megapixels means cropping and cropping means I can zoom by cropping, and that is a good thing versus an optical zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I've been experimenting with and I'm finding is that now I'm on the Z6, all of my lenses, which I'll get to in a minute, all my lenses are like there's a 50-50 split roughly. Half of them are FX, half of them are DX. And or you get one that's DX, but it doesn't. The body can't tell it's a DX, so it thinks it's an FX. Whatever.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, hack the Nikon. Anyway, get off-brand lenses, and you can do cool things. But anyway, yeah. So these lenses, are, of course, they don't have the reach because they're not DX. It's not a DX body, so I lose that extra, like 1.5x, and I did feel it today when I was doing cricket because I need that reach. So when it comes to cricket, I may not use the Z6 in the longer term. I may still use the D600, 500. Sorry,
D500.
Yeah. But anyhow, the reason I was bringing this up is that the optical zoom. So I've got the 85mm full frame prime lens, which is an f1.8. It's a beautiful lens, f mount. And I've been using that in the Z6 II in basketball, and I love it because I can be at the baseline now at the offensive end, and it's no longer too tight. So I can get them just in the full frame.
Yeah.
The downside is if I'm down at the offense end and I want to take photos of them in defense, they are now way out of reach.
Yeah.
It was tough before, but it's pretty much impossible now. So even with 24.5 megapixels, I've tried cropping to try and pull that detail out, and it's just terrible. It just falls apart.
Yeah.
It's not good enough.
Yeah. And the thing is that like your situation in basketball, 70 to 200 would be your best bet, I would imagine.
That I absolutely agree with you, hands down. That is exactly the conclusion I've reached, because I need the ability to zoom optically, because even if I were to go to a Z7, I think I'd face the same problem with cropping, because in the end, the optical zoom to bring it in to get the maximum use of that light is going to give you a better result in terms of the quality of the image than you'll get, with a prime and then cropping.
So there's a sort of balance here, right? You would be better off with definitely having the lens on the body that you want, right? Because you're 45 megapixels is a lot. Isn't that what it is? 45 or 42? What is it?
The Z7s are 40. Yeah, I think 40. It's 45.
Yeah, 45 is a lot. The ability to crop 45 is definitely better than cropping a 24, right? 24, you crop that, and before you know it, you're at 10 megapixels, and that is not something that's ideal. So if you like, let's say you could only have one camera body, and you're like, I need to have it for this other use case scenario, and also for sports, the 45 would be beneficial if you could not get, like, let's say the 70 to 200. But if you can get a 70 to 200 or something like it, you're better off doing that because you're not having to crop anything, right? You're basically just using the full frame.
Yeah.
And your camera actually has the ability to do 1.5 crop in camera, can it or not?
Yeah. I can do that if I want to.
Yeah, like so if I don't know how easy it is. I know it's not that easy. I think I could set it up to a custom button, I guess, where you could just basically just have it go to a 1.5 mode. And let's say if you had the 85 would be 85 and then 85 times 1.5.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I can do that in camera, but I mean, doing it in camera or in post, it's the same end result in the end. I mean, the pixels are the pixels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, true.
Yeah, but I mean, it just helps if I'm trying to frame it when I'm taking the photo, which I actually do when I'm doing planetary photography with the camera. Is I will actually pre-zoom it in that way. It just makes it a lot easier to frame it. But I guess in the end, my conclusion was that to get the best of both worlds, like the best backside illuminated sensor for low light, as well as the most versatility when in basketball, I really need the Z6 plus a 70-200, and I need that combination. So like the D500 is not the right choice because it's not as good with low light.
Right.
So, but having said that, that is a $3,000 lens. So yeah, can't afford to rent everything, can't afford to buy everything at this point. So gonna have to just wait.
How much does it cost to rent that lens?
In Australian dollars, yeah, okay. So I said 3,000. That's US. It's 4,000 Australian dollars, and it costs $188 a month to rent that lens.
And that's the Z lens itself, or that's the F lens?
That's the Z lens.
Okay. And how much is it to rent the F lens now, since the Z is out?
Well, if you pick one up on a nice Super Saver, you might get it for about $80-$90 a month, which is not cheap, but not impossible. I think at this point in time, I have that quandary, right? And it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's worth talking about. I think is, do you go with Z mount lenses or do you stick with F mount lenses? Because on the one hand, F mount lenses are plentiful. You can get lots of them secondhand, and with the migration away from F to Z mount, it's only a matter of time, and when there will come a point where you don't get a choice. It'll all be Z mount.
Yep.
And so, you can either jump ship now and head across to the Z mount, or you can try and pick up secondhand lenses and just keep using the FTZ adapter.
Yeah.
But I tell you, there's some interesting little things about the FTZ adapter. So I'm using the FTZ adapter on my Z6 II.
Right.
I'm also using the battery grip for it.
For what? For your D500? Oh, for your Z.
No, for the Z6.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never got the battery grip for the D500. I thought about it a lot, but I just couldn't. I just didn't.
You didn't need it, really.
Well, I kind of see okay, but yeah, I didn't need it for the battery, no, but I did need it for vertical photography.
Yeah.
So,
it's so much nicer.
Oh, it's beautiful for that.
Yeah.
Except if you've got the FTZ on there, and this is one of the things I want to mention. That FTZ adapter has this bulky knob bit at the bottom, that's got a tripod mount in it. Now, when you pair that with the battery grip for the Z6, your fingers get jammed between that, like the finger grip and the base of the FTZ adapter. Now, if you had a Z mount lens, you would not have a problem. But if you use the FTZ, that's a pain in the butt.
Then you do.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. The mount for the small, Nikon One system, the mount is pretty much the same because Canon doesn't have I don't think they have a tripod mount, but for some reason Nikon likes to put those mounts there. I mean, it's actually beneficial because I have used really big heavy lenses and used that tripod mount, and it's better to put it there than the body of the actual the camera.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And the longer the lens you've got, the better. The more appropriate it is to get it closer to the center of gravity.
Yep.
But I mean, anyway.
But yeah, that sucks though.
Yeah, I know. This episode is brought to you by Manytricks, makers of helpful apps for the Mac, whose apps do, well, you guessed it, many tricks. Their apps include Butler, Keymao, Leech, Desktop Curtain, TimeSync, Usher 2, Menuware, Moom, Name Mangler, Witch, and Resolutionator. There's so much to talk about for each app that they make, so we're just going to touch on some highlights. Usher 2, the return of the classic Usher, but now it's a full 64-bit app that works with the latest versions of macOS, including Monterey. So what is Usher? It's an amazing, powerful media management and playback app that can see movies you have in TV, music, and Photos apps or any library location you'd prefer on your Mac. It can organize them for you if you like. You can create advanced playlists and sorting criteria, and you can even edit their information all from within Usher. Menuware puts your Mac's menu anywhere, well, wherever your mouse pointer is. It's such a simple idea that is so very handy. Instead of having to mouse up to the top of the screen, press a hotkey of your choice and Menuware puts the menu right where your mouse is. You show the current active apps menu or the entire menu, then you pick your app from there if you prefer, and as another bonus time saver, you can even hide the menus that you rarely use. It's a great time saver for me, and I bought it within a minute of trying it because I saw the value in it immediately. Moom makes it easy to move any of your windows to whatever screen positions that you want, halves, corners, edges, any fraction you like of the screen, and then you can even save and recall your favorite window arrangements with a special auto-arrange feature when you connect or disconnect an external display. It has full touch bar support and keyboard integration with Adobe's apps, and it also works perfectly on an iPad operating in sidecar mode. It's the first app that I load on a new Mac because it's just awesome. Name Mangler. You've got a whole bunch of files to rename quickly, efficiently, and in large numbers? Well, then Name Mangler can help. It's designed for staged renaming sequences with powerful regex pattern matching. Recent additions include a group by feature. When making a sequence, and title case conversions can now keep their existing formatting or convert to lowercase on word length. The best part is, it shows you the result as you go, and if you mess something up, just revert back to where you started and try again. Witch. You should think about Witch as a supercharger for your Command Tab app switcher. If you've got 3 or 4 documents open at once in any one app, then Witch's beautifully simple pop-up quickly lets you pick exactly the one you're looking for. You can switch between tabs as well as apps and app windows with horizontal, vertical, or menu bar switching panels. With text search for switching, you can show the frontmost app in the menu bar icon with full touch bar support and much, much more. And finally, Resolutionator. And it's so simple. A drop-down menu from the menu bar, and you can change the resolution of whatever display you like that's currently connected to your Mac. The best part, though, you can even set your resolution to fit more pixels than are actually there. It's very handy when you're stuck on your laptop and you need more screen real estate. Now, that's just 6 of their great apps, and that's only about half of them, and they all work with the latest version of macOS Monterey. All of these apps have free trials that you can download from manytricks.com/pragmatic, and you can easily try them out before you buy them. They're all available from the website or through the Mac App Store. However, if you visit that URL, you can take advantage of a special discount off their very helpful apps exclusively for Engineered Network listeners. Simply use Causality25. That's Causality the word and 25 the numbers in the discount code box in the shopping cart to receive 25% off. This offer is only available to Engineered Network listeners for a limited time, so take advantage of it while you can. Thank you once again to Manytrix for sponsoring the Engineered Network. All right, so I guess what I want to talk about is the other limitations of that FTZ adapter. So the FTZ adapter is the F mount to Z mount adapter, and that means that you can use any lens with an F mount on a mirrorless, Nikon mirrorless.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the cautions is that if you do, then it will, if the lens has stabilization, then it will not, that stabilization of the lens, if you turn it on, will cut out the in-body stabilization in the Z6.
Really?
Yeah. And that's not necessarily the end of the world, because I tried that today with a 200 to 500, and the in-body stabilization on the Z6 was terrible. Which is not surprising when you consider the length of the barrel, when it's fully extended. So anyway, but the other thing that's interesting is that they've done lots of tests on autofocus speed. So if you look at autofocus speed on a native Z mount, like 70 to 200, and the F mount, traditional like 70 to 200 millimeter, like with the fluorite element, which I did rent for a few months, it is slower via the FTZ adapter.
Okay. By a lot? Or by just a little?
And I think it's enough to be annoying.
Okay.
I think that it's like the question would be is, well, do you invest in a lens that essentially for a mount that is on the way out?
Yeah. Now that's a good, and that's actually if there is enough annoyance, it's not worth it.
Well, the funny thing is, I've read a bunch of reviews, of course, as you do,
Mm-hmm.
and of particular interest was the one from Ken Rockwell,
Mm-hmm.
because I like reading Ken Rockwell stuff because some of it makes me laugh. He's got some interesting opinions.
He's special. He's a special guy.
He sure is special, and we love him just the way he is.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, so Ken's point was that it's impossible to tell how much spherical aberration that there is with this lens, and distortion and vignetting and so on, because the camera will correct for it, and there's no way to get a true RAW out of it.
Oh.
So, like as in like an uncorrected image out of the camera.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting choice on Nikon's part. So he said if you look at the complexity of the 70 to 200 millimeter Z mount lens, the whatever it's called, the f1.8s. Anyway, he said that it's surprising that they've managed to correct for all of that when you compare that to the F mount equivalent. So his argument is that the F mount was better on the basis that it was made out of better materials and it was made in Japan, versus the other one with the Z mount, which has got more plastic in it and made in Thailand.
He always did make those sort of arguments, though, depending on where something was made.
I know, right? I know. But I mean, the truth is that, it's still Nikon spec. It's still a Nikon factory.
Yeah. It's
just that the labor to make it is in a different country. So I do find that argument to be somewhat tenuous.
Mm-hmm.
If there was more substance to that, then Nikon would go out of business.
Exactly.
and not just Nikon.
Right. Yeah, because it happens to Sony and Canon as well. They do the same thing.
Exactly right. So rather than get hung up on his opinion, I think the point is more, for me, the practical application of the lens in the real world. They are both excellent lenses, and I think that the argument for the native Z mount lens is stronger, simply because you'll get faster autofocus speed and therefore better tracking, and it is also, not going to have the, I think it'll hold its value better.
Yeah.
So so I think that the ultimate goal for me is going to be, I will probably have 2 cameras at some point. If not now, if I eventually, save up enough money to actually buy out the rental for the Z6 II. I have listed my D500 for sale, but I'm not going to give it away. It's in great condition, but unfortunately, some people look at that and they say, well, I could pull a bit of like an extra $400 or $500 with it and get a brand new one. I'm like, yeah, well, you're clearly not the right buyer. So in any case, it's like, I don't want to give it away.
Right.
And it's a perfectly good camera. So I may well end up just keeping that and just gradually migrate across or get newer lenses for the Z mount as I go, and only use the FTZ adapter in a pinch.
Yeah.
Like if there's a particular lens I really want to use on the mirrorless, I can. But anyway, so let's just talk about my lenses then real quickly.
Yep.
And this is essentially my complete list so that I have right now today. So I have a DX 35mm, which is these are all AFS lenses, by the way. I have a 40mm micro DX lens, which is my macro lens, which I used for film, photographing film and slides. Yeah, I know.
Nice.
Yes, I know. Not the same way that you do it, of course. Take the film photo and then scan it. But still, I bought it because I had a whole bunch of old film that I wanted to digitize. And the difficulty for me with that is simple, and that is that, if I don't have the a native DX camera, then I'm not going to get the full sensor size.
Yeah, that's
which sucks.
True.
Because, so, and before I go any further, this is one of my gripes about the Nikon system. If you attach a DX lens via the FTZ adapter on a full frame mirrorless, it will auto crop it, and it's basically an enforced auto crop.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you get enough light to illuminate the FX sensor, you cannot get more than 10 megapixels.
Ouch.
Which is
yeah. Jeez.
So the forums are filled with people that are saying this is no bueno.
It's not.
What you gonna do about this, Nikon? And Nikon's answer has been, there's nothing we're gonna do about it. You're gonna buy an FX lens if you want FX. Shrug.
Yeah.
They don't care.
And I remember, I don't know if you know about Canon, but when they went with their crop bodies, their EFS lenses, their crop ones, never actually work on full frame. So that's one thing Nikon actually gave us, is the ability to still use those. Yeah, it crops it, but they at least give you the ability to use it.
Wow. So
I don't know how it is with mirrorless with Canon, but that's how it was with the DSLRs.
Well, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So if I want to be digitizing, film still, then I will, and I want to keep that lens, then I'm going to have to, use the D500, which is fine. It works, but it just means that I'll need or I need a DX mirrorless, because I guess technically if I use the FTZ on like a Z5, then that would work.
Yeah. A two body setup with like the Z7 6 and the Z5, what's the Z50? Is that the DX body?
Oh, I meant Z50. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that that would be actually a nice setup for sports? For the reachability and for the
yeah, it would be for outdoor sports. My problem is the indoor
sports. Yeah.
So it doesn't have the low light performance of the Z6.
Right. True.
That's the problem. Anyway, I mentioned before my favorite prime, the 85mm f1.8. That's a full frame, and I leave that attached to the camera most of the time. I like all the portrait photos I took. It's a beautiful portrait camera, and I use it for indoor basketball at the moment, and it's still my best choice for that. I have my super cheap extra plastic 55-200mm DX lens, which I don't. Oh man, I can't remember the last time I used that. I should probably get rid of it. And then of course what I call the novelty lens, my 200-500mm full frame. That's a beautiful f5.6 constant aperture lens. It's just magic. I love that lens.
I love the app. I wanted that lens so bad. That constant 5.6. Oh,
I know.
Nice.
It's an incredible lens. But every now and then when I'm using it now on the Z6, I'm like, oh, man, I really need a 1.4 or a 1.7 tele on it.
Yeah.
But because if I go to a 2x tele, that just pushes it to f11, which in daylight you'd be right. You'd probably have enough light and with the ISO that you can go to on the Z6, you could probably get away with it. But I worry about how soft it'd make the image. I've seen plenty of people doing tests of the 200-500 with the 1.4 and the 1.7, and it's still super sharp. But as soon as you go to the 2x tele, it just starts getting soft, and I'm like, I don't like a soft picture. It's like, John would be.
No, the 2x adapters have always been iffy. The only time I've seen 2x adapters be like ideal are in the old Tamron, the old Adaptol days, where it basically kind of becomes a part of the lens itself.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why why we couldn't have that system still, where someone makes us almost make it part of the body, but yeah, 2x is not ideal.
And then of course there's the 11-16mm Tokina, which one of the things on the FTZ is that because it's a Tokina, the Z6 doesn't recognize it. Now the thing that's interesting is that because it doesn't recognize the lens, which means that autofocus doesn't work. Autofocus does work on this lens on the D500 though. which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it's a DX lens, which means that because it doesn't know what it is, it doesn't try to auto crop it.
Right.
So I get to see the full, circle.
Yeah.
As you change from 11 to 16, you see the circle, fading just around the outside of the image, which is cool.
Where is it usable? It's starting to be usable.
It's usable at the narrower end, not the wide end.
Okay, so it's more like 14 to 16 maybe?
Yeah, it's more like a 15 to 16.
Okay.
Which is really more like a 16. But, but the other thing that's interesting is, of course, because there's no autofocus, so I've got to go manual focus. But, of course, with a wide-angle lens, it's usually less of a problem. It's an f2.8. But, yeah, anyway, it's still a great lens. And you can still select it in like in Photoshop and do the lens adjustments after the fact.
Oh, okay.
So you just tell it, oh yeah, by the way, I took this on a Takina, 11 to 16 DX, blah 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 blah, and it just takes care of it all for you, which is cool.
Yep.
But yes, that's an interesting little thing about the FTZ adapter on that one. And I used to have a 50mm FX with the body motor, which I've got rid of, that required the body motor for focus because of an AF, not an AFS. I sold that. That's gone. And I did rent for a few months a 70 to 200 FX Pro lens, which was gorgeous. But I just couldn't keep paying the money for it, so I returned it. Kind of was annoying. So how about you? What lenses are you currently sporting on your Sony?
For the Sony, it's a 15 Voigtlander, 15mm, which I actually originally bought for real estate photography, but I don't do that anymore. So it's mainly my landscape, cityscapes, architecture, astro.
Hang on. Hold the phone. Hang on.
Yeah.
You did real estate photography?
Yeah.
Seriously? Tell me about this. When was this?
Yeah. It was a couple of years ago. It's actually fun because basically you just get like the space. You just get the keys to the place and you just get to, no one's bothering you. Very often it's just like you're just they say, okay, how many hours do you need? You walk in and you a lot of time. The one thing that sucks about real estate photography in the United States, I don't know how it is elsewhere, but people are messy. And they would leave their place a mess. And I'm like, do you want to sell the place or what? So I would actually spend a lot of time cleaning up and setting up their stuff for them before I actually took pictures. And that's kind of why I sort of walked away from it a little bit.
You should have charged extra for that, man. Come on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have. That's a good point. But yeah, like, you look at a place and you're like, okay, this place should take me maybe an hour to shoot. And then you walk in and you're like, oh, snap. This place is a mess.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, there's a difference between making a place look like it's lived in and not actually caring enough to tidy it up.
Right.
It's kind of a fine line there. Actually, not such a fine line. It's kind of an obvious line, I would have thought. All right, cool. Interesting. Okay, didn't know about that. There you go.
Yeah. Cool.
So that was the super wide.
Yeah, that was a super wide. I mean, because the one thing is, a lot of times people, when they go shoot places, they just maybe stitch two pictures together. But if you're doing maybe HDR, because let's say the light was extreme outside versus inside, it's easier just to have two pictures or three pictures, and rather than having to stitch a bunch of pictures and then also HDR merge, it's just so much easier. The 35 2.8 sonar, which is actually I think my first lens, because I bought my Sony with just body only, and then I went to look for a lens, and it was the 35. I was actually using it with like cheap adapters, using my old manual focus lenses, and the 35 2.8 is basically just sort of a small pancake, like lens. I finally bought a 50 1.8. I've always had a 50 1.8 in every camera system I've had.
Yep.
And I didn't have that for Sony until just recently. And the reason I got that is because when I'm doing portrait sessions and I'm in a smaller space, the 85, which I also have, it just wasn't working because I was too close.
Okay.
I have a 90mm, which was my portrait lens, and the issue was with my old Sony A7. I was having issues focusing, and that's why I got the 85. Now I'm happy I got the 85 because it is so much better for portraits. The 90 is awesome for when I'm doing weddings and I need to shoot details. And then I just bought the 2 to 600 with a 1.4 adapter, and I haven't shot it as much as I wanted to because of work, but it feels so right in the hand.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful lens, that one.
Yeah.
I've heard, yes, I've heard many good things.
I almost bought the 100 to 400, and then I was gonna do a 1.4,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna always have a 1.4 on there, so I'm like, I might as well just go for the 2 to 600.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But the 100 to 400 was also very highly regarded.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't think you could go wrong with either of those lenses. But if you really wanted that reach, then I can understand the choice you made for sure.
Mm-hmm. If I were shooting sports, I would have gone for the 100 to 400 just because you could actually focus closer, like the closest.
Yeah, versatility.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and the thing is that the ability for the subject to be closer to you, because the 2 to 600, you have to be close to 8 feet away from someone or something.
Yeah,
for it to even start focusing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the other thing I found is that even with mine with the 200 500, if I put that onto so I put that to 6 meters to infinite when with focus, so it doesn't even bother trying.
Yeah.
And if you do flick the switch over to full range, then it still struggles at 200 millimeters to focus on anything.
Yeah.
So I mean, I tried that today in the game of cricket. I was photographing for the club, and yeah, it struggled. It really struggled up close.
And this is on the Z body.
Yeah. Yeah, and I basically got it with the manual override. I basically gave up in trying to get autofocus to work for someone that was too close.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to get like a really tight headshot for someone that was at the 200 mil, and it was just not happening. Was not playing the game. But anyway, all right. Well, that's pretty cool. I did have one other thing I wanted to mention with and this is more of it was sort of like an epiphany, and an epiphany that I had late in the game. So last episode, because I re-listened to the last episode as preparation for this one, and one of the comments I made in the last episode was regarding the number of stops of light you get with in-body image stabilization. The thing that did not occur to me at the time, but it has since dawned on me, as I said, as an epiphany, is that in-body image stabilization is effectively pointless above a certain shutter speed. Because what I didn't realize is that, so I mean, if you're trying to capture action like I am going in a basketball court, the lighting's terrible, but you still want to capture it at least. I try for 1/1000th if I can get away with it of a second, because I don't want any motion blur.
Right.
And the difference is astounding. If you can go 1/1000, 1/1600th, I can't go any higher than that, because then the ISO has to crank too much.
Right.
But in-body image stabilization is not going to help you at those speeds, because you're not going to see any movement from your hands or yourself moving at those speeds. So it's there to protect against your hands shaking and moving when you're taking a lower shutter speed with a longer exposure. And it's a silly thing, but I didn't realize that at the time. So I thought, I'm going to get like an extra 2 or 3 stops of light of light out of it. And it's like, well, no, it just means that I can go lower, so I can in fact push it down. Instead of like the lowest I could take a photo would be like the slowest would be 1/100th maybe. I can now drop that to 1/50th, let's say, because of in-body image stabilization.
Right.
But once I reach a certain shutter speed, it ceases to have any use.
Right.
And that's something I didn't. And I have thoughts on that.
Yeah. So in-body stabilization, when you get past a certain shutter speed, and also when you get past a certain focal length, right? There isn't as much benefit. Now, if you have a native lens to that body, and that, let's say that lens, like the 200 to 600, has stabilization built in, and you turn it on, the combination of the lens and the body, they work together to sort of help stabilize that lens itself. Now, the shutter speed, if you're past a certain shutter speed, hopefully you're not shaking enough. Because if you shake too much, I mean, it doesn't matter how much image stabilization you have, you screwed the picture, right? You know, if you're shaking too much for it to compensate for, you know, let's say 5 steps of compensation, it doesn't matter how good of a stabilization it is. If you're shaking too much, it's of no benefit anyways. But the in-body stabilizations are really meant to sort of save you for the lower shutter speeds, slow shutter speeds. But at the same time, it's also meant to sort of, I'm not so sure how. I haven't really researched Nikon, but Sony, and I know if I'm not mistaken, I think Canon has it where the stabilizations with lens and body are supposed to sort of become this one unit to sort of be greater than what it used to be when you had a DSLR.
Yeah, that's exactly what the Nikons do as well, or rather,
okay,
that's what they say they do. Because I have no native Z mount lenses, so I can't tell you.
Right.
What I can tell you is through the FTZ they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've got, so as I said before, the 200-500, it has image stabilization.
Right.
So in the actual lens, so if you turn that on, that forces the in-body stabilization to turn off in the Z6.
Okay.
But if you then turn off the lens stabilization, the in-body stabilization will turn on.
Okay.
But you don't get to do both.
Right.
With a Z series lens, you get to do both.
Okay. Now I have a question. So, and this is I need to do more research about this with my setup, because do you know if you were to turn on the lens in a Z system, stabilization for it, can you turn the body stabilization off?
Not sure.
Because the thing is that for my Sony system, which was weird, right? I thought, okay, I have stabilization on for the lens, and I go in the camera system to turn off the stabilization of the body. And with that lens, there's no option to turn off stabilization in the body. If the lens stabilization is on, the body stabilization is on, which is really weird.
My understanding is that that's the case of the Nikon as well. Is that
okay?
It's either you've got stabilization or you don't, and if you connect in a Z mount lens, I think. I mean, I could stand correct. I might be wrong, but
it probably is the same.
I seem to recall
it
reading
probably
that.
is the same, unless there's a way for me to find some sort of override in the body. So far, I haven't found it yet, because I was just trying to sort of do some tests, right? And I wanted to see, okay, in body stabilization off and lens stabilization on, just to see if there is if it is a benefit to the two of them working together versus the body not having it on. And there was no way for the body to be off.
Yeah, I do wonder about that exactly, and I also wonder why it would have to be
right
either or. You know, with the EF mount, I don't understand why. Unless, of course, there is no reason why it's other than a marketing thing.
Well, I'm wondering actually, because if the thing is that if you have stabilization in the body on, and then you have stabilization in the lens on, and the two don't really talk, right? So you might have a system where one is stabilizing sort of the effects of your hand out here, and the other one is stabilizing the effects of your hands closer. Maybe the two of them might sort of conflict with each other, because like one is basically, when the lens to your body, the camera to your body is stabilized by your body and your head. The lens being out there sort of slightly sways, and if you have the two of them talking to each other, at least they can work together. But if the F to Z adapter doesn't actually make the two of them become one unit, maybe that's why Nikon just said it's easier for them to just say body or lens in terms of FX versus Z.
I'm not sure. I need to do some more research in that one, to be honest. Maybe we'll we'll talk about that some other time when I've had some more time to dig into it, and you have as well. But I would be curious to understand the logic behind it.
Right. Yep. Same.
But I guess because I don't have too much else I wanted to cover, I guess I do. I just want to quickly mention that a comparative just before I wrap up my wrap it up. The Z6 to the D500, for those that are curious, I've done the comparison now for indoor basketball, and I can effectively push the D500. It starts to get a little bit too noisy and a bit too grainy. Not wishing to get into that debate either. But anyhow, around about I think the ISO is anything lower than about 2000. I'm trying to remember the setting. But I can go as low as 6400 on the Z6 II without noticing, without getting. So if I go below that, it gets really, it becomes more noticeable.
Amazing, 6400.
So I know, I just couldn't believe it. I had it down to 5000, and I play between the shutter speed and the ISO.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still on the fence as to which is better, because I think that going for a 1/1000 shutter and then an ISO 5000 is a better option.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at f1.8 on the 85mm prime. But if I go the other way and say, well, I want to go to a 1/1600th, and then I drop the ISO to 6400 to get that extra light back, then it starts to be sort of like, well, am I pushing to be too noisy now? And am I really going to see much of an improvement in reduction in motion blur by going to a faster shutter? So the jury's out. I'm still playing. It's only been 2 months. I've taken photos of, I think, about 6 games at this point, which has been enough for me to settle on that. But I need more time, obviously, and it'll be interesting if I do pick up a 70 to 200mm lens at some point in the future, because that will be a constant aperture f2.8, whichever way I choose to go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lose stops of light there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to make that hard choice again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would probably shoot your lens now at 2.8 and see, like make it like your floor, right? Just and see if where if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I have done it a couple of times, and I will say one of the other things I do love about the mirrorless is that the electronic viewfinder correctly shows you the light, the illumination you're going to get based on the settings you've got up to a point.
Yep.
So if I crank the ISO up and down, the brightness of the electronic viewfinder goes up and down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do that with a DSLR. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Can't do that, can you? No, you can't. There you go. So I think it's fair at this point in closing to say that my conclusion is that mirrorless is definitely the future. Although admittedly, I said that many years after you already had said that. So there you go. That's not revelation. But, hey, I think that there are so many more advantages to mirrorless that it is obvious to me that, DSLRs are going to die. It's only a matter of time, and probably not a very long time. I think that we may see a small number of DSLRs come out in the major brands, and then it's going to become rather like the different sized formats of sensors now, where you'll have maybe Hasselblad or Leica or whoever, like some of the more, how do I call them, artsy brands? I don't know, ones that where
the niche brands.
Yeah, very niche. And the majors like Canon and Nikon, they might release another one or two.
Yeah,
but that'll be probably the last ones they ever release, I would think.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm actually surprised we I mean, yeah, I think Panasonic, Olympus, and Sony have proven that mirrorless was viable a long time ago. And then when the Z system came out, and the R system came out, especially Z2, and the R system came out, like, it's inevitable. It's like there's no way anyone could look at that and say, I'm gonna go buy a D5 instead of like a Z6 II.
Yeah, exactly right. If you want to talk more about this, you can reach me on the Fediverse at Chidgey at engineered.space, on Twitter at John Chidgey, or on Word, or the network at engineered_net. I'd personally like to thank Solver by Aqualia for sponsoring the Engineered Network. You've tried a calculator and a spreadsheet, but if you haven't tried Solver yet, you're missing out on a great app that fits perfectly with the way your brain actually thinks. Solver 3 for Mac is available from the solver.app website as well as through the Mac App Store. If you use the URL in the show notes, it helps out the show. So please use that URL in the show notes to learn more about this amazing app. Check it out today. I'd personally like to thank Manytricks for sponsoring the Engineered Network. If you're looking for some Mac software that can do many tricks, remember to specifically visit this URL, manytricks.com/pragmatic, for more information about their amazingly useful apps. If you're enjoying Pragmatic and want to support the show, you can by supporting our sponsor or by becoming a premium supporter. We're edging closer to our monthly goal to go advertising free across the network, but we can only do that with your help. You can find details at engineered.network/pragmatic to learn how you can help this show to continue to be made. Big thank you to all of our supporters, and a special thank you to our silver producers, Mitch Bilger, John Whitlow, Kevin Kosh, Shane O'Neill, Oliver Steele, Leslie Law Chan, Hafthor, Jared, and Bill, and a special thank you to both of our gold producers, Stephen Bridle, and our producer known only as R. Pragmatic is a podcasting 2.0 enhanced show, and with the right podcast player, you'll have episode locations, enhanced chapters, and real-time subtitles on select episodes, and you can also stream Satoshis and boost with a message if you like. There's details on how, along with the new Boostergram leaderboard on our website. If you'd like to get in touch with Clay, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, mate?
If I'm anywhere online, just look for CW Daily, and you'll find me.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much. So once again, a thank you to all of our supporters and a big thank you to everyone for listening. And as always, thanks for coming on the show, Clay. It's been great to have you back on.
It was the best. Thank you so much. And by the way, the episode is episode 101. I'm going to go listen to Pragmatic 101 Astrophotography. So if any listeners haven't listened yet, go listen.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.